Let's start officially this roundtable. So thank you everyone for being here. This is the second roundtable that is organized as part of the GLITSS, so European network, globalization, illicit trade, sustainability and security, as you may know. And Francesca and I are in charge of the educational output or deliverable from this GLITSS project. And as part of this, we organize roundtable on how to teach on illicit trade. And this roundtable is dedicated especially to how to teach illicit trade in academia. And so for this, we have 3 speakers that are here. And I'll briefly present them, introduce them now. So first, thank you very much for the 3 of you for being here. So first, we have, sorry for the pronunciation if it's wrong, but Ermira Kalaj, who is a professor of
Kalaj. Yeah.
Kalaj, thank you for correcting. Who is a professor of financial markets and institutions at the University of Shkodra. Is it right?
Yeah, perfect.
And she has a PhD in economics and management that she received from the University of Trento in Italy. And her research interest focuses on public sector economics, income distribution, and econometrics methods. Then we have Anna Sergi. Thank you also very much for being here. She's a full professor of sociology of law and deviance at the Department of Political and Social Sciences at Alma Mater Studium in Bologna. Her research field is within critical and cultural criminology, but more applied to organized crime studies. And finally, Stefano Caneppele, who is professor of criminology at the University of Lausanne. And he worked at Transcrime before at the Università Cattolica di Milano in Italy. And he worked on several projects on organized crime, illicit trade, and transnational criminal activity, as well as also cybercrime, online fraud, corruption, and trafficking in sports, well, sports-related crime, let's say. So thank you very much for being here. Francesca, maybe you can switch the slides. I think it's you sharing the screen.
Yes.
Should be.
Can you see the slides?
We see the first one.
Wait. Wait a second. I will try again because I'm so sorry.
No problem. Meanwhile, I can already introduce a bit the objective of this roundtable. So here we want to explore how the topic of illicit trade. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
How the topic of illicit trade is taught in especially in academia. And you will see we have a set of questions that we already sent to you to guide a bit the discussion, but the goal is to identify best practice and also format and learning methods that worked in your experience. And here should the roundtable should really be seen as a way of let's say for someone who would like to create a course on illicit trade. If you, based on your experience, if you can provide some tips and the good practices that this person could follow to create a first-time course in illicit trade. So then I'll let, just before letting Francesca the floor with the questions, I'll just say that I'll try to manage the time for this roundtable while Francesca will guide a little bit more the discussion. So we have at least now we have 50 minutes more or less for the discussion. At the end there will be a Q&A session. So if people that are not the speakers but that are here want to participate, don't hesitate to write questions in the chat or to raise your hand. Or at the end, we will have a session where we will have a common discussion where you will be able to share also your experience or your thoughts on what is said. Okay, so now, Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucas, and thank you again, everyone, for being here and for your interest and your commitment to share the experience you have in teaching illicit trade. So my role is to guide you a bit through the discussion, and we'll try to have as much interactions as possible. And as you already know, we are going through a series of questions. And we start immediately kicking off with the first bucket, so the first round of questions. And the key topic is, how do you approach illicit trade when you're in class? What's your approach to the concept of illicit trade? Being all members of GLITSS, we are aware that the concept is very broad. So the question is how to address this in class. Do you provide a definition of illicit trade? Do you focus on specific sectors? Or do you address illicit trade more broadly? And finally, do you differentiate between illicit, illegal, informal trade? And I think that each speaker has its own approach, but I would ask perhaps Anna, Ermira, and Stefano to give their views in this order, and then we will change, let's say, order every time. Anna.
Hi, everyone, and thank you. I must admit that I joined this mostly to learn from others instead of just me speaking. But I can share my experience. I've been teaching illicit trade more specifically for the past year, because before that, when I was at the University of Essex in the UK, I was teaching more generally organized crime. So this year, my university in Bologna asked me to do something a bit more specific for one reason specifically, which is the fact that I'm teaching students of international relations in a Master of International Relations with a focus on crime, justice, and security. So they thought that illicit trade, so we thought together that illicit trade more than just organized crime, which is also covered in some parts. So the module I am teaching is specifically considering illicit trade as a form of organized crime. And it does, to answer your question, I ask the students to find a definition of illicit trade. And what they usually come up with is the differentiation between illicit, illegal, or informal trade, because that, I think, is something that is very obviously done. Just to bear in mind that my class are about 25, 27 students attending, so it's a smaller class. And that these are master students, which means that, they supposedly already are familiar with how to do their own bit of research. So we do this very early on, the illicit, illegal. I must say illicit, illegal, mostly informal, just doesn't come in that often. Maybe we bring it in later on. So I do not provide a definition of illicit trade. Basically, we just start with the idea that it's very broad, and effectively that we mean both illicit, illegal, and actually the construction of how illicit and illegal is treated in policy documents or in general in policing techniques is part of the analysis. We do focus on a specific sector, I'm afraid, but that's mostly because the course is divided in two parts. So the first part is illicit trade more generally. What do the illicit trades have in common? So the trading bit. As I said, part of the organized crime, let's say, activities as one activity of organized crime. Then we zoom in into the drug trade, and specifically because we move to my research on this, which is ports and the role of ports into illicit trade. Most of it is done via case studies. So when I teach it, I bring them case studies, and this is helpful for two main reasons. Because case studies come from the news oftentimes. So I can have a never-ending pool of case studies by reading the news daily. And also because it allows me to not just focus on the drugs. So I tell them very straight away, my research was on cocaine in ports. So a lot of my examples will be on cocaine, on illicit trade of cocaine through ports. But at the same time, through other case studies, I can, expand a bit. I think the general element is that they need to be able to find out what is special about a commodity that warrants a deviation from normal illicit trade generalization. So the drug trade obviously has a commodity that is oftentimes not always illegal in itself. So it's the commodity that it's illegal, it's not just the trade. And that is not the same for other type of illicit trades, of course. So I think that's usually what we end up doing. I do not work on human trafficking in this course. I think human trafficking, I used to teach it years ago as part of the organized crime module, but I think it warrants now more attention in migration studies than it does in organized crime. So to me, human trafficking doesn't fit in here. We talk about commodities, or in some cases, I think that the main issue is to differentiate the commodities from being legally illegal or somewhere in between. So we talk a lot about art trade, for example, illicit trade of art and antiquities. And I think that's mostly it. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I think on some parts, formats, case studies, we'll come back to it, so we can further elaborate. Thank you. Ermira.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this roundtable. As previously Lucas mentioned, I lecture financial markets and institutions, which is not, let's say, very related to illicit trade, but where in my classes I regularly connect financial systems with issues such as informality, regulatory gaps, and illicit economic activity. In the Albanian context, these topics are particularly relevant due to the persistence of informal practices, I have to say governance challenges, and recent cases involving financial fraud and cross-border illicit operations. I have to say that in my classes, I approach illicit trade more as a broad and evolving phenomenon, especially relevant for countries like Albania, and try to emphasize that illicit trade goes beyond traditional forms and somehow increasingly includes financially sophisticated and digital activities, as I mentioned before, involving financial fraud. For instance, during my classes, I try to discuss the emergence of illicit call centers operating from Albania, involved in fraudulent schemes targeting mainly foreign citizens through fake investment platforms or sometimes cryptocurrency scams. And yeah.
No, thank you, Ermira. I think this is extremely relevant. Maybe we can address it in the case studies examples, because you seem to bring a lot of the
this is the way how I approach illicit trade. So through these case studies.
And we will for sure mention them later on. Stefano, what's your approach?
Yeah, thank you, Francesca and Lucas, for setting up this workshop. In my classes, we have a master program. Students don't have a previous background in criminology in most of the cases, so the approach is quite broad. We are talking about organized and economic crime, and I use to the concept of illicit markets, explaining that beyond the actors, it is important to understand the functioning of the markets, and inside we can mention illicit trade. The problem that we have, as probably already Anna mentioned, and also Ermira, is that illicit trade is a very broad topic. So focusing on all the aspects of illicit trade in one course would be quite challenging, especially if you don't have a previous background on the problem. So what I used to do in my classes was to have a first block presenting the debate about in criminology, about the way in which organized crime is framed based on actors from the market perspective, and then moving to some application in some, say, illicit market or illicit trades that are quite specific, like drugs, arms trafficking, human trafficking as well, and also natural resources. And that's the approach that I took because I saw that sometimes you need some very concrete example, and then I really endorse the way in which we should use case study to provide a practical application and examples of how the illicit trade operates. Because the other important point that I tend to stress is this: it's not just only organized crime that is involved. Singular individual actors may also play a role, especially at the baseline of the chain of the illicit trade. Of course, there is a very complex situation that needs to be studied, understood, and is not sometimes quite easy to communicate it in a 2 hours course per week over 1-2 semesters. So the challenge that I'm actually facing, also with Lucas, we are discussing whether we could develop a specific and targeted course on illicit trade, but the challenge is also to fit it in a program that should be also consistent in terms of the educational offers that should be aligned with all the different courses that are provided.
Yes, thank you, Stefano. Thank you all. And I think that we already touched a bit the teaching format, but this is actually the main topic for the second question, which fits perfectly with what Stefano was saying. So the question is, do you teach illicit trade as a full course, as a module, as a single lecture? Probably it could be an entire master program, but what format has worked best for you, and why? So maybe we can go in the reverse order. So Stefano, you can further elaborate on what you were saying, and then Ermira and Anna.
Yeah, let's say from what I also learned from the other colleagues, this is not a topic that you can usually teach in a bachelor degree, because it's already more sophisticated, and it requires some more, let's say, a critical analysis, understanding in terms of comprehension. So my first suggestion is to design a course that should target at least master students as a target audience. Then it really depends, and there's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on how much energy and resources you have, and how important this topic is in your master offer. Of course, a single lecture would be a bit reductive. I would be at this stage in my master, which is a generalist master, will stay more on a module style with at least 4 or 5 classes on it. But of course, it will be ideal to develop a course, and what format has worked best and why in the past. What we also try to do in our exercise is to ask them to, beyond the, let's say, the theoretical part, show some case studies and ask the students working in group and developing a research project on one form of illicit trade. They have to do a literature review. They have to select one specific problem, try to gather data, and present a feasibility study that should focus on the research question they raised. And I think this is a good exercise to learn how complicated might be investigating and researching illicit trade, and which data are available, which data can be used to provide, let's say, a good picture of the phenomenon that you want to portray in your study. And of course, the most important thing that you also have to provide feedback to students once they submit a project to advise them what it is doable or not, feasible or not, or accessible or not. Because one other challenge that we have also in terms of data access for illicit trade is that sometimes data are not so easily accessible as they could be sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. Just to clarify, the module you were talking about, it's a module in a master course, and the master course is in criminology.
Yeah, it's let's say it's a course, analysis of economic organized crime, and what we envisage is to have a module inside this course. This is a course on over 2 semesters, so we will tailor some of classes just devoted to investigate the issue of illicit trade.
Oh, thank you. Ermira.
I also teach in a masterclass, as I mentioned before, where students first need to understand how financial systems operate and then maybe analyze how they are exploited. For instance, when discussing financial supervision and regulation, I introduce those examples of fraudulent broker platforms or call center scams, while also discussing how regulatory gaps and corruption risks can weaken oversight. I have to say that illicit trade is multidisciplinary, and Albanian examples clearly demonstrate that this thing, meaning that cases such as this illicit services, as I mentioned before, involve either economics, finance, law enforcement, and digital technologies. Even in my lecturing practice, I also use examples and case studies. In general, to make the topic more concrete, I introduce sometime simulation exercises. For example, I ask students to take the role of a financial regulator and analyze a hypothetical case of fraudulent broker platform. And sometimes I've seen that these type of exercises, or let's say role play case studies, help them to move from theory to practice and better understand how illicit activities are detected and maybe try to address them.
Thank you, Ermira. And Anna, what's your teaching?
Yes, so as I said, mine is a master course in a degree on international relations with curriculum in crime, justice, and security. So it's in between international security studies and political science, criminology, I would say. So that already changes things, also in terms of the students I get. It is a course, so it's a module, sorry, and it's 40 hours, where, as I said, I basically divide it up in 3 parts, and the first part being illicit and drug trade more generally, where we ask, where I use the concept of complex crimes rather than organized crime to basically capture trading and trafficking illegally and the political economy effectively of illicit trade. I work through the actors and the tools of specifically the drug trade, but then I move to the security crime problem and how does it build the illicit versus illegal. tension. And with that, I moved to the conflation between border security and border policing. And then I moved to, ports and the mobility of illicit goods through ports. So that's what I do. What has worked best, a bit like Stefano was just saying, is to give students the tools to understand, as I said, what changes illicit trade. So whether it's the commodity, whether it's the border, what type of border. So what are the variables in the illicit trade that change the trade? Because at the end of the day, illicit trade is very predictable. I mean, you make something illegal that people that will want to fill the gap. So it's a basic economic model. So that's the learning format. And in fact, as we might want to discuss later, their assignment reflects that, because for their assignment they have to do a portfolio of activities. One of the portfolio activities, the main one, is to choose, like Stefano suggested, an illicit trade, follow it around, so with media news and with policy making, let's say, policy responses. The most successful portfolios are the most comparative as well. So I encourage them to look at different countries and different areas, and then eventually understand what is special, if anything is, about that illicit trade. And when I say if anything is obviously to capture that element of the illicit trade that is, that changes the predictability of it. And in a way, I think that worked best, because this is where the students, well, first of all, where their input is seen, and where they do I would say the illicit trade they like. So a lot of this is where we talk about arts and antiquities. There, some of them went to very specific illicit trades that I could never touch upon in class. So I think that type of element of, student input is necessary. Otherwise, we'll eventually just teach a couple of illicit trades and, and leave everything outside. But giving the students the possibility, I think, and this key lens to understand it is probably, to me, has worked very well. I used to do one other thing, which is to give, before AI came around, which was to give them, they had to write a script, like you are an illicit trader, choose an illicit trade, and try and basically a Pac-Man project based on a paper I wrote on Pac-Man in Portville, where they basically had to pretend to be illicit trader and try to escape police. But that was borderline unethical, I guess. I'm not sure about that. So, and now with AI, they basically just brought it with AI, so I stopped.
Yeah, perhaps we can discuss later in the assessment of the role of AI, or the challenges of this. Just maybe I use my power as moderator to ask a quick question to Anna and Stefano, because for Ermira we heard that she uses Albania in the case studies, in the examples. I wonder whether you use Italy or Switzerland or specific countries in the case studies. I mean, coming from, let's say, the local experiences, or not.
In my case, sorry, Stefano, in my case, not really. I mean, for two main reasons. Because Italy tends to be, it's too much of Italy already. And of course, we mention when it's relevant. I do with the port cases, I've done research all over the world, so no. And I don't think it's helpful, especially when it comes, to certain specific illicit trade. Sometimes the cases that they find are Italian, and that, it's perfectly fine. But no, I think I very much encourage, also because the student body is quite international. So that would, and by the way, I should have said that the course I teach is in English. So even if it's in an Italian university, so that I have plenty of, 2/3 of the students are non-Italian.
Oh, great.
Yeah, in my case, there's one point I wanted to raise, that the size, or better, the focus of illicit trade is really scalable, in the sense that you may have an illicit trade at local level, you may have illicit trade at transnational level. So if we, for example, look at the drug market, of course, it's an illicit trade that you can analyze at urban level. For example, in Lausanne, there was a huge debate about the drug market and the strategy that you have to deal with it. And so that's a good example sometimes to show that the issue of the illicit trade are not so far and not so international, and then affect directly the life of the people. And I also use some cases, for example, you know that Switzerland is not in the European Union, so there are some border control, some limitation in terms of the quantity of goods that you can import, and this create opportunity for example, illicit trade. There was a very sophisticated operation of trading meat. So they were buying meat it was in France. They arranged different deposited meat just close to the border, and they were just transferring the meat because in Switzerland, beyond 1 kilo per person, you have to pay the custom tax if you want to import them. So they were trying to circumvent. So my idea when I present the cases to students is just saying that you have different level from which you can study illicit trade, and illicit trade is not only an international dimension, which is very relevant. It really depends on the focus that you want to adapt and to approach. So that's also because it really depends. For example, Anna is a more international audience. We have a more mixed audience, people working with the police, and then we want to work in the police at the local level. So it is important also to show them that this concept is not so far from what they may encounter in their future professional activity.
Thank you all for the clarifications. I think we can move to the third question. We already discussed the fact that teaching illicit trade has some multidisciplinary element, and so the question is, how do you address multidisciplinary discussion, and then which disciplines are involved in your teaching? Law, criminology, economics, we heard the financial regulation. So how do you address this multidisciplinary nature of illicit trade? And we also thought about asking you whether you use co-teaching or guest lecturers or practitioners. So how do you collaborate with external experts in teaching this topic? And I would say, Ermira, you go first, and then we have Stefano and Anna.
Okay, thank you. In my teaching, as I've said, because my course is mainly economics, I combine an economic perspective with elements of law, governance, particularly when discussing why such activities emerge, I mean, in the Albanian context. Generally, illicit trade or illicit activities in Albania are moved from factors such as limited employment opportunities, institutional weaknesses, and corruption perceptions, which can influence both the supply of illicit service but also the tolerance of illicit activities. During my courses, I try to have guest lectures, mainly from institutions related to these activities, if I have this opportunity. I mean, not always they are, let's say, free to talk about these topics, at least in my country's context. However, when it is possible, I invite guest lectures, and we have discussions, because these discussions help students to better understand illicit trade, and see that illicit trade is not only a criminal behavior, but it is more systematic, or it has to do more with systematic vulnerabilities. This is from my side and from my course, which has just 2 or 3 lectures on illicit services.
Thank you, Ermira.
Yes,
Stefano?
from my side, we don't have, let's say, on regular basis, invited guests. We seize the opportunity when we have the opportunity. So we had some people from FEDPOL, the Swiss Federal Police, presenting and discussing some issue about the illicit trade. We had also the opportunity to invite some speaker from UN, presenting the way in which they estimate the illicit financial flows in a pilot study that has been done in Africa. And the point from my side is now, since we have the GLITSS network established, what we were considering is just to set up an offers or a course that would be able to merge different disciplinary perspective, which is not so easy, by the way, because the problem and the challenge is that you have to fit with your audience the different expectation that they have and the different background that they have. So the challenge when dealing with a multidisciplinary class is to find the right equilibrium between general interest and in-depth in the discipline that in which you are, say, mainly based. But that's something that's it's an open question that we try to address in the next months.
As for me, as I said, my students are mostly international relations. Some of them have done some sociology, some of them have done some element of political economics. Very few have done criminology, because criminology does not really exist in Italy in a standalone subject. And in a way, how do I address the multidisciplinary nature of illicit trade? The same way I had to do it when I started the research. So I've done, when I started, that's what I tell them. So when you do the field work in ports, you have to learn the language of port security, which is international security. Then you have to learn the language of port economics. Then you have to learn the language of policing. Then you have to learn different languages. So the first few weeks are really about readings. So I give them selective readings, pre-selected readings that they can choose from. And these readings come from more or less 3 or 4 subjects. And depending on what they studied before, they are attracted to one or the other. I don't think so. This can be said to be problematic because, of course, they don't reach the same level of understanding, but I prefer them to keep on their language and then to, at some point, question their language with everyone else. So I don't think it's helpful if I just tell them, oh, read this, when they don't understand necessarily anything about criminological methodologies or this. There is too much knowledge that I have to give them before having them read something. So I prefer to do this, so to select readings from different disciplines that sometimes, I must confess, I don't fully understand myself because that's not necessarily my language. But I can trust at least the methodology and everything else to be decent. So it's also interesting for me to see how they react to the readings, because then we have to discuss the reading in class, and you can immediately see those who chose international security or international relations versus those that chose sociology. So you have ethnographic research of illicit trade compared to policing, comparative policing work on multi-country level illicit trade. So different things. And the same goes for methodology. I think there are very different methodologies, and our students do not necessarily have the same level. So if I give them a network analysis of heroin trafficking, which is based on a number of different obvious data collection mechanisms, they might not get that. So, I prefer to have a differentiated reading list, basically. And I don't do co-teaching. I haven't done guest lecturers as of yet, because last year I was basically thrown in the class the day I joined the university, so it wasn't that much fun. But as Stefano, I mean, if anyone happens to be around, actually, it's for everyone at this roundtable, if anyone happens to be around in Bologna between October and December, give me a call. So,
Indeed. I mean, GLITSS, it's also meant to create network
yes.
and connection. So absolutely. And thank you all for sharing.
Francesca, just one thing, because I'm the timekeeper. So just I would propose for the next two set of questions, which is the next one is the teaching material. We already touched upon it a bit. So maybe I can propose the speakers to, let's say, merge the two questions. So if you want to add something on the specific or particular teaching material that you use, please feel free to tell us about it. We'll be interested. And I would propose to merge it with the next question, which is how do you assess the students? So this is also related, because maybe you might give students some lectures or some specific cases that they will have to work on, and then you evaluate them based on them. So maybe I'd propose to merge those two so that we keep the roundtable on time.
Yes, no, it works. Perfect. So these are the two questions. So, and actually, I think we discussed already a bit the case studies. The Anna, I think you also mentioned the choice at the very beginning when different groups of students make their choice. I wonder, maybe we can start from Anna, Ermira, Stefano, and as Lucas said, elaborate a bit on the materials, and then go into the assessment, which is how do you evaluate the students? So what's the traditional format for exams or alternative formats? What's more effective?
Yes. So as I said, for me, it's been complicated in a way, because obviously I came from the UK with a certain way of doing things, and then I moved to Italy just recently with a whole other story. So in Italy we keep, and I'm very happy with that, oral exams, which obviously you don't have to do just oral exam, but that basically means that the students have to be able to talk to you for like 10 minutes with 3-4 questions, and show ability to argue and maintain their argument, which I think it's in the age of AI is fairly. We are so backward in Italy that we are actually forward, which is great. However, I kept some elements of my UK perspective, which was, as I said, the case analysis, so the portfolio project. The portfolio in this case is supposed to, well, they are supposed to do a presentation in class, and the presentation, and then with the presentation, they have to submit the portfolio. The portfolio can include media reports. It can include over a specific, so they have to choose a specific time frame, specific area of the world, and justify those choices and specific illicit trade, and then basically write eventually on the presentation a report on that, which should be referring back to the documents that they have selected, which, as I said, could be media reports. We have to discuss about which media, obviously, because it's complicated in this age, and policy reports, institutional reports, anything that is not purely academic, if that makes sense. So their case analysis have to basically apply academic thinking to, real case studies. I do teach them through simulations. In particular, I've used, because it's drugs and because it's sports, there is a very cool infographic by Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime on a report and a project to which I contributed 3 years ago now, which was called Portholes. They've done a fantastic infographic where you basically can follow the illicit trade. Well, some bags of cocaine into banana boxes from somewhere in the Atlantic all the way to Europe. And it's done with a very cool infographic. It doesn't say anything that I couldn't say without the infographic, but I think it's helpful in that sense for them to see. I use a lot of maps. I show them maps all the way, and one of my students told me that basically I do teach them how to traffic cocaine, which I'm not sure that's my role, but eventually, you know. So in a way, that is paradoxically how I assess them. So whether they can think on both sides of the spectrum. So it's a very applied course in a way. So on the oral part of the exam, I target the academic thinking. So obviously we go on theoretical approaches and everything around that has been written on the academic side. But on the case analysis and the presentation they have to do, I evaluate them basically at, you know, how do you succeed if you were both a trafficker or law enforcement? So and sometimes you can see that they don't have the full picture. They forget border regulation. They forget anomie, or they forget asymmetries across states. So that kind of things for me are all evaluative materials. But I definitely find that the more in depth they go into the illicit trade, the more they tend to develop that kind of understanding. So yeah, I think that's still part of I'm still learning how to evaluate them in Italy. So yeah.
Thank you. Ermira?
I have to say that there is lack of data sets on illicit trade, especially for Albania, and given these constraints, I find that applied and qualitative assessment methods are more effective, meaning that I design classroom simulations. Students have to analyze real cases from Albania or sometimes from the region, it depends on the data, and identify how these schemes are operated. For the final examination, I use the classical written way, but there is also a space, or there is a lump sum of points for the continuous evaluation, and this continuous evaluation is mainly based on this real cases discussions. So this part is also included in the courses of financial markets and institutions.
Stefano?
Yes, at this stage in our master, the illicit trade is in the course analyzing organized and economic crime. So basically, the course is structured around 3 parts. One is much more about theories, and the theoretical part about understanding the different characteristics of organized crime and their markets. Then we will move to another section, which is much more focused on the tool that we can use. We have other classes which provide other support. We will focus on social network analysis, and we will do a validation through a data set. So this will be part of the final mark. And then we have the group work with project they have to present and preparing group in like a research project, developing and looking at the literature, developing the research question, and proposing a methodology that is coherent with the research question and is feasible in account project chart. So we ask them to have this critical posture, and in the end, since the number of students is quite consistent and elevated every year by year, it's around 60, 70 students. We go through written exams because we consider that doing oral exams when you arrive at the 50 of the 51 students, you will not, so let's say, careful in listening the answer after 3 or 4 days about the same question. So we move to the written assignment, one challenge that now we are currently facing is a written assignment, handwritten, but with the use of AI, preparing pro research project and so on should be, let me say, disputed in the sense that we have provided some clear guidelines about how to use AI and how they can use AI in drafting the research project. They're not prohibiting this because we have not the tool to double check 100% if they use it or not, but we try to critical assist student in order to develop some skills also in using AI in increasing the quality of their output. But still, it's an open debate that we have right now in the way in which we can complement, incorporate AI also in teaching of this trade.
Yeah, I think that teaching in the AI world could be a topic for another set of roundtables, and I think we all struggle with that. But for the sake of time, I think we need to move to the last and the final reflections, and then we can discuss a bit with open discussion in the end. But before we move to the discussion, the final question I ask is one piece of advice that you would give to a colleague teaching illicit trade for the first time. So you already mentioned a lot, so it can just be a repetition or a short pillar of what you already said. But if you have a piece of advice, please let us know.
I would go with having a mind map of what illicit trade means to different disciplines and just put the mind map at the forefront. Students need to understand, in my head, very early on, I think, like we did, that illicit trade is a matter for criminology, sociology, international relations, political science, economics. So that mind map already helps to understand that and to use that map at the very beginning to showcase that whatever we do in this module is never going to cover all of it. And as you said at the beginning, we might have a whole master on it and still wouldn't cover all of it. So I think the students need to know that what we do is a very small portion. And that portion, by the way, to me, that's very important. It needs to be filtered by us. This is why AI is great, but we are still needed. We are still relevant because we select the material and they need to understand why we selected that material. I always tell them, this is my background, this is what I researched in illicit trade. So of course, I'll try and do as much as I can beyond my expertise, but it's still going to be just a portion of it.
Thanks. Stefano?
The piece of advice that I can provide is just to try to be as simple as possible at the beginning, not to want to embrace all the different sides or perspective of illicit trade, just to take one angle, explaining, as already Anna said, that you will not expect to cover all the points that are in the illicit trade agenda, but I would encourage him or her to think about the way to have an incremental way to develop the content, starting from the very basic, and then testing the level of reception from students, and then increase progressively the intensity of the pace of the content that they want to provide. But just starting from the basics, because it's really a complex concept, and if you start with a very complex concept, you risk losing your audience since the beginning.
Ermira?
My advice is to approach to illicit trade maybe as a dynamic, systemic, and sometimes context-based phenomenon. Even with the constraint of data on illicit trade, real-world examples sometimes provide powerful teaching tools.
Thank you. Thank you all. We have concluded the questions, the pre-structure of the questions. but I think Lucas is our time manager, but if you allow us, we open a bit the floor for discussions. If you have questions for one another, or if there are other questions from the audience or from the chat, this is your time.
Yeah, I think maybe meanwhile the other people are thinking maybe of a question. I have one thing that came to my mind because we were discussing quite a lot about AI and also how it changes the way we can assess, evaluate the students. But also I was wondering about the use of AI in constructing the courses or the teaching. So I just wanted to know, based on your experience, do you use it to maybe facilitate the creation of illustration, of visualizations, of maps, of I don't know, or just for the text, or is it something that can be also helpful there? So the question is not directed to a particular speaker, but if you have experience on this and you have something to say.
Yeah, let's say I can start. I already use it, Claude, ChatGPT, Notebook LM. I just also out of curiosity, and then just not only for creating infographics, sometimes also to think about different exercises that may be provided to students, or even things that could raise the attention of students. And recently, I just create a sort of simulation of a conversation, just to conduct an interview with a ChatGPT bot that was acting as a corrupted person. So students can practice the interaction. Just it could be useful also for how to enhance your capacity in providing interview, and also this tool I haven't tried yet in the course because it's a bit say quite recent, but can also provide a first feedback to students. The recommendation that I also received for other colleagues that are more advanced with AI is that this kind of tool is useful to assist your teaching during the class, not just delegate outside the course, because unsupervised content at least maybe not so bulletproof in terms of validity. So it's interesting. It's interesting to check the say the reaction of students. They like testing new things, and it's a bit challenging, but I think it's also an opportunity. It's not just something that we should avoid or be scared of.
I also use, if I can add something, I also use IE during my lecturing, especially to construct, for instance, infographics when there are some complicated concepts to explain to the students. But also it's helpful when designing the case studies or role playing in class for the students.
Thanks. Anna, you have further comments or no?
I think in general, like I said, I use AI myself. I've encouraged the students to use it to do this cat and mouse game of being an illicit trader, and that which prompts them. So this is not part of the assignment. Now it was part of the assignment. Now it has become a background of the assignment, whether they want to use it, where basically through AI and basically dialoguing with Claude or ChatGPT, whatever they prefer. I prefer Claude. They basically can see their blind spots. So how basically Claude wins as an illicit trader or as a law enforcement officer. So that makes them creating the prompts makes them already have to reason on what are the blind spots. So I think, but I'm still working on it, so not sure about the results yet.
Thank you. I mean, I also have a question, but I think I will put it like this, but it's actually more of a curiosity, is that do you face the risk of training students to be future drug dealers or part, I mean, on the, let's say, not on the good side, but on the bad side of illicit trade, like teaching them how to really navigate regulations and also see that the gaps, the loopholes. I do wonder if ethically it's something that you face also to raise awareness of, okay, I teach you this topic, but I also want to, be aware that I'm teaching you this not to circumvent rules or to become part of the illicit trade system. If we have time, I mean, I know we are running a bit late, but that's I think, the last question.
Can I answer? In my classes, I've had students that worked in those fraudulent call centers. So I've done small questionnaires on how they work and maybe divide or share their experience with the other students. But let's say they are just workers at those call centers, but they give some information on how they work or how they are acting. This is from my side.
I don't have a particular problem with that in a way. I mean, I think whatever they do with their life, most of them want to go and work in international, jobs, international relations job. Others want to go into more policing type. They need to know how to be good traffickers. So I don't have a problem with that in a moral sense. Whether they go along and become traffickers, I mean, I think that's very abstract. So I'm not, I don't think necessarily that's an issue. I don't think our job is to be moral in that sense. Plus, I always tell them we have a discussion on prohibition very early on, specifically because we talk about drugs. My position on prohibition is particularly clear to them in terms of me advocating for, you know, very generous level of decriminalization and legalization of drugs specifically. So I think that makes it easier in a way to bring down the mythology around the trafficking.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, our student has to provide a police certificate, a clearance from before they apply for the master. But in any case, I mean, it would be the same topic for people studying cybersecurity, people studying accounting. So actually, university has to provide knowledge. Of course, knowledge can be applied by individuals according to more standards. And of course, we cannot prevent that someone may potentially exploit this knowledge for criminal purposes, but I think it's still quite remote possibility. And of course, we're not there to just to supporting illicit traders. We are there to present the phenomenon, presenting the flows of the law enforcement system, but also the fact that being an illicit trader is not as easy as it may be represented in the Netflix series, for example. So it's not so easy, and it's a complex matter and subject that should be analyzed from an academic perspective.
Yes, thank you all. It was more of a provocative question, but no, thank you. Thank you, really. Thank you, all of you, for your contribution. There will be a third roundtable in June with scholars coming from the US. So we will soon share the details. So if you want to join us, we will continue the discussion with them. And I leave the floor to Lucas, but I think we have to close the meeting.
We are already late, but thank you everyone for sharing your experience. Thank you for your time. It was really nice.